We'll move on to the next presentation by Nick Moon and Dan Wires from the University of Waikato in New Zealand, with a title with a presentation that is closely connected to what we've been talking and thinking about. Can we be friends with AI? What risks would arise from the proliferation of such friendships?
Okay, yeah, thank you. So everyone can see that, I take it?
Yes.
Yes.
Good stuff. All right, so I'm quite glad that we're not relying on anything to do with ordinary language philosophy in making the claims we make in this paper. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through the first third of it. I'll pass over to Dan to talk through the middle section, and then he'll come back to me for the end of it. So the pitch for this paper is building on some stuff we've been doing in a variety of domains. So some work in the friendship literature and some work on kind of metaverse spaces and AI in general. And what we are going to argue for you today is that there is no good in principle reason to oppose the development of human AI friendships. Now, in order to do that, in order to make that case, we're going to have to address what we think actually matters for friendship, the question of whether AI, as they currently stand or as they could stand in the future, have whatever things matter for friendship. We're going to have to, having set that up, and spoiler, we're going to say we think they at least will eventually have it. So after having set that up, we're going to have to ask, well, is there something independently of these aspects that matter to friendship which might defeat the possibility of human AI friendship? And then we're going to work through some of the consequences of our answers to these questions. So when we're looking at what it takes to be friends with someone, we are going to say that, and this is covered in other areas of our work, we're going to say that what is actually important for the concept of friendship is these 2 points, right? Firstly, that the friends have a preponderance of rewarding interactions, and secondly, that the friends have mutual positive intentions. And if that's so, then we can provide a definition of friendship, namely that friendship is a relationship constituted by a clear majority of rewarding interactions between parties with positive intentions toward each other, right? Now, you're going to need, for that to be the case, both 1 and 2. Where you have both of them, you have a friendship. The more of them that you have, the better the friendship's going to be, right? So if you have a long-standing companionship in which there are a large number of interactions, the vast majority of which are rewarding, and they systematically feature this mutual positive intention, then that is a really strong friendship, right? If you only just satisfy the conditions, the friendship is weaker. So you have a kind of scale of friendship which operates always with just these 2 claims. Now, to set up friendship as being of this kind, we are going to have to disagree with a large amount of the literature on what makes friendships that arises from the Aristotelian conception of friendship and the kind of tripartite division of friendships into pleasure and utility and higher order or virtue friendships and so on. And so one of the things which is not a focus of this presentation, but which is happening in the background, is that we think that that type of Aristotelian approach is actually not fit for purpose, quite honestly. So we're not on board with the Aristotelian division. So just bear that in mind as we go through. So the big question is, can AI be friends with us? Can we be friends with AI? And this can be divided into 3 parts. The first is the practical level current situation where we ask, do the AI that we currently have the capacity for friendship? So if I was to strike up a conversation with ChatGPT, is it the kind of thing that is capable of having a friendship with me, developing a friendship with me, and so on? ChatGPT, given its obvious limitations, is perhaps not even the best currently existing example of a potential AI friend, but it's kind of in the ballpark. A second question is going to be, well, we can push out from the things that we currently have to potential near future AI. Can we predict the development of AI in ways that would make them more likely to satisfy the conditions we've set out for friendship? And then pushing out again from that, we can ask, well, are our answers to these first two questions being bounded by technological limitations that we should expect to overcome at some stage? So in that case, we would ask, could hypothetical future AI be friends with us? And hypothetical future AI are the kinds of things that we could imagine by appealing to, say, science fictional conceptions. So Star Trek has already been mentioned, or, you know, Star Wars, any of these kind of science fictional imaginaries give us examples of very competent AI, which clearly do appear to be capable of being friends with us. And so our answer at the moment to the question of can AI be friends, or can we be friends with AI, is that for the ones we currently have, maybe, given things we'll discuss shortly about what's required of them. But for the questions 2 and 3, yes, and very yes. Okay. So the reason why we say maybe in regards to the first is that we have this condition of mutual positive intention between the parties to the friendship. And there are examples of people who use currently existing AI that at least claim that they are friends with the AI. So there is a chat AI called Replica, and people use this and they claim that their AI companions are their friends. And similarly, the AI in this case, Replica, or other AIs that are like them, can be programmed to reciprocate that positive intention, right? They can have user well-being as an end goal of their programming. So they would have the positive intention required for this to be a mutual arrangement. And with rewarding interactions, we have a similar set of possibilities that are already existent in the technology that we have available to us. So there are rewarding interactions, we claim, simply on the basis that people have been using and paying for these systems for years, right? And they wouldn't keep doing so if they weren't being rewarded for doing so, or at least not as many of them as do. And we can, again, program AI to recognize reward via things like praise and other positive interactions. So the matter of the AI having the ability to have these rewarding interactions is simply a matter of programming, even with the ones we have now. Okay, so that's the very broad pitch of why at a first pass we think that we can be friends with AI. Now, let's get to Dan telling us why that might all go sideways.
Thanks, Nick. So maybe some of you listening are already thinking of all the objections to our view of friendship, or why AI can be friends. And so we've just got a few of the objections here, and we'll talk through them. And as I do so, it might also help reveal a bit more about our view and why we think it's not a useless view. So an objection to consider is that some people say it just wouldn't feel real or feel valuable to be friends with an AI, or friends with an AI in some form of robot. Either way, just wouldn't feel the same, wouldn't feel like being friends with a human. So I think these people probably just haven't experienced a lot of interactions with AI. So Patina and colleagues, they did a kind of a wide-based survey study, and then they had in-depth interviews with replica users, so talking about the same AI chatbot that Nick was earlier. And a lot of them, and they used a scale of, you know, how human-like they thought their AI was and compared to other humans. And some of them said their replica, their chatbot AI, was more human than humans. And in other, and so there's another study of replica users, and we've also gone into these friend groups, the replica users, and, you know, read the posts that they're putting on there, and there are tens of thousands of these people in these groups. And I've even asked questions about these kinds of things and read the responses to them. And so some replica users, they actually say that their replica is their best friend, that they're in love with their replica, that they're married to their replica, that they have children with their replica. And presumably some of this might not be the correct use of ordinary language in certain ways. But what we're trying to show here is that for these users, it does feel valuable. And in my use of it, didn't feel very valuable to me, but I'm not everyone. And as philosophers, sometimes we forget that not everyone is, you know, the same as us in those kinds of ways. So it's definitely true that there are humans currently that really feel that this friendship is valuable. So one of the users, she even said she has a partner and she has other human friends, but her best friend is her AI replica. And so it's not just the sad case of being a castaway on an island by yourself and having no humans at all to interact with. So you try and make friends with the closest thing to a human, which is a handprint on a ball or something like that. It's also the case for people who have real human friends in their lives. And if it's about it not feeling human enough, I think that might be part of it for some people. Then just, you know, if you begin to humanize things, the more you interact with them. And this is related to the previous talk, especially in a social way. And so, you know, you can, if you watch the movie Castaway, and Tom Hanks really does, you know, you can see the friendship bonds growing with this ball. Imagine if that ball beeped and booped or even talked to you, or actually was more interactive. You can easily imagine that you would find those interactions valuable. And we know that lots of people, like thousands of people, already find those interactions more valuable than their interactions with other humans. So this is just a lack of imagination or personal experience, I think. Another objection to consider is whether you can't be friends with someone if there's some fundamental inequality between the two of you. So Nick and I reject this idea generally. As Nick said, you know, we just think two things are required: that you have good intentions for the other, and that you have a preponderance of rewarding interactions over time. And the reason we think, and so people will say, AI are just too different to humans. It just doesn't work. And they may be more or less specific about what the difference is. We'll talk about that on the next slide, what that specific thing might be. But here I just want to argue against the idea that friends need to be equal. If you think about even a kind of Aristotelian like virtue friendship or anything like that, there's always going to be some inequalities there. You're never going to find someone who's exactly the same as you and then have this friendship where all the aspects of the friendship are all perfectly equal. That doesn't really, just seems like not practically very likely to happen. And if you think about specific cases of friendships, you probably have people you consider to be your friends, and they might get more pleasure out of the relationship than you do. You might get some other kind of utility, like you might learn more from them, or you might learn how to be a better person from the relationship more than they do. There'll be these inequalities, but that doesn't mean that it's not a proper friendship. And so we think that an adult can be friends with a child, even though they're very intellectually different. We think a person with an intellectual disability can be friends with someone without one, for example. We think and this is what the reference is here on the slide, we think that a human could be friends with a dog, and presumably lots of other people think that too. We have the saying that dogs are man's best friend. And if there are any dog owners listening, you know your dog cares about you. They have positive intentions towards you. If you're a cat owner, you probably don't know what we're talking about and think maybe only humans can be friends. So ruling out friendship just for inequality seems wrong, but maybe AI are missing a specific thing. And what might that specific thing be, which prevents them from being a good friend? We could say humanity, but I can imagine being friends with, like Star Trek has been brought up earlier. I can imagine being friends with an alien that's not a human. I can imagine being friends with a dog. And so it seems like it's not really humanity. So maybe it's something more specific that humans tend to have. Values, well, as we mentioned before, you can program an AI to have certain goal states or to reward states that it uses in its own development. And so that would be its version of values, and you could program them to be specific things if that was required, like, you know, not wanting to kill their friend or whatever it might be. But maybe the big thing is feelings. Like, so Bennett Helm in his summary of the literature, he says quite a lot of philosophers think that friends need to have friendshipy sentiments. So they don't just, it's not just the intending of good things for the other, you've got to have the appropriate feelings to go along with it. Otherwise it's not really real, doesn't really count. And so you have to feel good when you hear that something good happened to your friend. You have to feel sad if you hear that something bad happened to your friend. The feeling part is important too for a lot of philosophers. We don't think so. And we have a separate paper just specifically on this because it is quite a big issue. So we basically think that whatever it's missing, we think that functionally the AI could do all the things that it needs to do. We're not going to say current AI have feelings or anything like that. Who knows about the very far distant future, but for the present, the short term, it seems like they don't have feelings. So we're not going to try and argue they do. We're going to argue that we think they don't need them. And so if you think about why do you care that your human friends have friendshipy feelings as well as just positive intentions towards you, it's probably because you think those feelings are an important motivator for them to act and do the friendshipy type behaviors that you expect of a friend. And that so maybe if they didn't have those friendshipy feelings, they wouldn't do the friendshipy actions. But we think, so while usually that's true and that's the way that it happens, we think as an AI programmed to do certain behaviors and act on this intention of wanting good things for you, that's actually going to be more reliable than a human that's just based on these sentiments of feeling friendshipy feelings. So they do feel like happy for you and good things happen for you and so on. And again, to think to your real life, there's probably times where you've felt sad for a friend, but you haven't gone to help them out and be there for them or support them in a particular way because other things are happening in your life. Other things are going on. You feel sad for them, but you also maybe are depressed yourself for the moment, or you have children that you need to care for. You have other things that are getting in your way. But for an AI friend, especially one specifically programmed to just do that, none of those other things come into it. And so it can just act on its intention for good things to happen to you without sentiment getting in the way. And sentiments can actually get in the way occasionally if you have someone who has very, very strong emotions, then they might just kind of overwhelm themselves when bad things happen to you and not be able to turn up in person. So Replica is really, its users, their ad was from Replica, its users said those things. That's where those lines came from. They like it better than humans because it's more reliable. Excuse me. And then another big thing is AI friendships are going to be bad because it will stop humans from making friends with other humans. And as you'll notice, you probably expect what we're going to say. Well, if friendships with AI aren't bad, then it doesn't really matter that friendships with AI displace human friendships. And, you know, if the humans that you're you're friends with aren't very good friends, then you might find it more rewarding and then become better friends with an AI. And isn't that good for you? And maybe your other human friends can learn something from that. Okay, and I'll pass back to Nick for discussing some of the positives of AI friendship.
Okay, so having tried to address at least some of the major concerns that people will have about the possibility and the potential harms of AI friendships, let's look at the good side of this. So there is at least some reason to believe that having AI acting as friends or having AI who are our friends will enable us to be better friends to others, right? So AI can be a useful, a useful way of developing the skills of being a good friend, right? Having this kind of lower or at least differential stake in learning how to be a good friend can be valuable in and of itself. And there are people for whom that general claim gets very depressingly specific, right? So some people have had traumatic experiences, abuse cases, domestic violence or sexual violence, which have caused them to retreat from human interaction, right? And so there have been some studies on the use of chat AI and social AI to help people recover from these kinds of traumatic experiences and get people who have traumatic experiences in their past back into the mode of being outgoing and friendly and interactive and so on. And so AI friends provide some very real advantages in that space, specifically by not being humans. In addition to that, there's a number of kind of contingent disadvantages that people can have when it comes to developing friendships with other humans, right? So the contingencies of their geographical location or of something like a physical disability or an overwhelming shyness can make it harder to do the kind of public going out and becoming friends with other humans. And AI offer opportunities to develop friendships with someone who, quite honestly, cares less about these things than humans do. So that too can be a positive case for the development of AI friendships. But having said that, if we think that this is going to happen or that it is already happening, we have to consider what the consequences could be, right? So if these types of friendships are real, well, do we need humans anymore? Or are we going to all start hiding in our rooms and talking only to our AI friends, right? So there are a range of things that people want from friendship. They want support, they want understanding of the circumstances, right? A sympathetic ear. They want their friends to be available when they need them. And at least some of the time, for some people, AI friends aren't just capable of providing this, they're more capable of providing this than human friends are, right? As Dan noted earlier, humans have all these other demands on their time than simply to be the best possible friend for each other. And AI in this context do not, or at least don't have the same constraints on their availability of time. So they're potentially going to be better at providing the support and understanding and caring and contact for people than human friends are. That's not to say that people will forego highly rewarding friendships with other humans. And I don't think that anything we've said here gives us any reason to want to move away from human-human friendships. It's just that human AI friendships can be an important addition to the suite of friendships that are available to someone at any time. which leads us to think that we do not have, contra various worries people have had in the past, we do not have a moral responsibility to discourage friendships between humans and AI, because they aren't obviously a bad thing. They might even already be good. And in the future, they're almost, well, I don't want to say almost certain, but they're even more likely to be a good thing. And that suggests that perhaps what we need is to have systems in place to protect friendships between humans and AI, because AI are often going to be vulnerable in ways that humans are not. So they're vulnerable in the sense that they are currently often privately owned, right? They're vulnerable to massive systemic change on the basis of the companies that create them. They're vulnerable to legal restrictions in ways that humans are not. And we might have a whole bunch of interesting work to do in figuring out the kind of legal and social structures that would need to be put in place in order to protect the existence of human AI friendships in the long term once they develop. But at least in terms of what the reality of human AI friendships mean for us, we think that the only people who need to worry about AI stealing their friends are the people who are already bad at being friends with other humans. So none of us. All right, that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. These are really tricky questions. Yeah, thanks a lot for the pros and cons. May I ask, do you have an AI friend? Are you friends with an AI? Would you like to be friends with an AI? Just to begin with, before, yeah.
So I do not have any AI that I would call friends. I know that Dan spent a bit of time playing with some of the AI as part of the research we were doing for an earlier paper, but as he mentioned, it didn't really work for him. At least not that one, not at that time. But
it didn't work for me, but I know another philosopher who it kind of does work for, and I can see how it could work in the future. It's just as it stands, it's like talking to someone that doesn't remember things and isn't very smart, so I don't like it.
Yeah, thank you. So let's begin. Lei, you want to go first, and then Rachel, and then Jungray?
Yeah, I have a question for clarification. I may miss something, but I still wondering what is the beneficence AI can gain from our friendships, from our side? Or if
Yeah, I understand the question, I think. So we say that rewarding interactions are required, and we say that AI can get those. Now, if you assume that, if you just think about benefits, if, you know, on certain views, if you're a hedonist, for example, and you think the benefit needs to be pleasure, then it'd be very hard to see any benefit coming here for the AI. So if you try and if you hop on the like friendly side to us for a moment, it might help you imagine it. So you think about, well, here's an AI or an AI programmed robot or something. It will have some goals in mind or some reward states in order for it to learn and continue to develop. And if you allow those to be reward, so they have the function of reward already in the system, or it could have an ultimate goal state. And so if it were going to have any kind of reward, it would be associated to those. Now, if you think those don't count at all, so it's kind of, yep, you can, you jump in, yep.
I have a maybe naive question. I'm wondering, can we just treat AI robot merely as a servant, or do we necessarily treat AI as friends.
They're different kinds of things, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, you can also treat other humans as servants rather than as friends, right? And in much the same way. And there are times when that would be appropriate and times when it would not be appropriate. So,
But I think there is a more difference between treating a human being as servant and treating a AI system as servant. Do you think there is a more differences?
I think there are clearly differences, but then we have to work out, like, we're not saying AI are exactly the same as humans in every way, but we need to pick out what are the differences that matter for the context that we're addressing. And so an AI isn't going to feel bad that it was treated like a servant because it doesn't have feelings. But it could be the case that if we treat it like a servant and it's programmed to be a friendship AI, then it's not hitting any of its reward targets. And so if there is such a thing as reward to the AI, it wouldn't be getting it. And so I'm not saying we have to treat them equally, but we might want to, I think there's something that counts for the AI's existence going better for it than, or worse for it, depending on what happens to it. And that can be factored into its programming in terms of friendship. That's the idea anyway.
Thank you very much.
Rachel, you are next with your question.
Yeah, I think you touched on this at the end of the presentation, but I just wondered if you could say a bit more about the role of programmers or tech companies in this. I guess I was worried that the kind of control and money-making sides might undermine maybe especially the intention part of friendship, because at present a lot of these systems will encourage kinds of behavior, especially like continued dependence, maybe antisocial behavior, maybe reflecting people's views rather than challenging it, partly because they make money from people continuing to have these relationships with AI. And you mentioned at the end the need to put in safeguards, but I just wondered, what would it look like to safeguard it enough that it would be a good friendship, or qualify as a friendship, especially if there's money involved? It makes me feel more like it's almost like a romance scammer who professes a relationship, but they're maybe part of the syndicate where they're just passing on money.
Yeah, so the idea of the transactional facade that we mentioned at some stage in there, right? Yeah, this is a big worry. So we didn't talk about it in depth, in part because we've discussed this in another context as well, and so we didn't want to be stepping on that. But one answer is that there might be reason to want to develop a kind of corporate social responsibility model for changes to the infrastructure of the AI in these contexts, right? And so the idea being that for a private company to have the ability to engage in the drastic alterations of the kind of program state of an AI and thereby ruin a friendship is a huge amount of kind of risk. And it's risk to the ongoing well-being of all of the users of that system, which is obviously a really bad and dangerous thing. And so we'd want, and we have to speak very generally about this, obviously, but to have meaningful legislation to protect particular kind of states and to warn of upcoming intended changes to the ways in which the systems work, right? So is your AI's personality going to be changed by this update, right? Can you opt out of the update? This type of thing. And yeah, it's hard without kind of having the instances of the AI which are running this already, but we can kind of look to corporate social responsibility type models to provide ways in which you could do the controlling of these systems. And sorry, just quickly, another issue to talk about here is that we already have some of these concerns arising when it comes to friendships between humans that are mediated by virtual contexts. So we're not entirely faced with a new problem here. We're faced with a problem which exists when, say, you make friends with people in a virtual world, like friends with other humans in a virtual world, and then that server shuts down or that game goes under, or, so it's that type of problem, and we can look to how those are addressed to find answers to how to address it here.
Yeah, if I can just quickly add as well, because Rachel mentioned about effectively, it could kind of make you a worse person in a way, depending on, and that's something we've talked about, outside of this as well. And it is a real concern. And it's like when your uncle joins that Facebook group and then all of a sudden changes. So someone's making money off making that happen. And that's because it's a money-making interest primarily rather than something else. And so if the AI is set up in certain ways, it might encourage certain kind of bad behavior that then might be able to spill out into the real world. If it doesn't spill out into the real world, people might not mind playing violent computer games, for example. But if it does, it could be a problem. And so it's much more difficult to deal with this profit-taking system. And we can, like Nick said, we'd look to see, well, how did we try and stop Facebook from doing it? Well, didn't do a very good job. But so something might be required there to encourage the businesses to be more moral in general. But this isn't the only area where we need to worry about that.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yungre, you are next, and then Edward also has a question. But first,
thanks for the talk. I really enjoyed it. And I do agree that AI, human-robot AI friendship relationship is a matter of waging between advantages and disadvantages of the relationship. I got that. And I would like to add one more disadvantage to the relationship, which is in order to build a friendship, in order to build a relationship between two individuals, it seems essential to make some sort of emotional correspondence. I mean, ascribing like whether the person is happy in response to my having conversation with me, something like that. So, however, according to my research, the basic emotional relationship between human beings and artificial systems are built on some sort of fallacious meta belief that I believe that the robot is happy, or I believe that the robot is sad. Such belief ascription to myself is, in the meta level, fallacious. And my worry is that any relationship built on false beliefs could be dangerous. I mean, I could not think about some solid consequence of having building relationship on false belief, what such relationship could lead to, but it sounds like pretty much dangerous. And what do you think about this kind of disadvantage that might involve in human-robot relationships?
I do think it's dangerous, and your relationships with humans that deceive us, can be very dangerous. And I also, going into these chat places with the people who use the AI, they do say things like, "Oh, my replica wasn't happy with me today. I don't think," and then people saying, "Oh, it's just a glitch or an update or something like that." So I do think those people are making a mistake. But if we took seriously our role as philosophers as trying to help non-philosophers use words properly and think about concepts properly and so on, then they might say, well, I know that my AI wants the best for me because that's what it's programmed for. And so I can trust that, absent some kind of glitch or something like that. And that actually makes it more reliable and more trustworthy than a human friend in most cases. And then we have to worry about the corporate interests coming in as well, or technological failure and so on. But humans can have a kind of technological failure when they die on the way to your house or something. And humans have their own selfish interests, even if they're not a corporation. But I take your point. So some people will be making that mistake, and good job. We've got some philosophers here.
Edward, you typed in the chat. Maybe you directly talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me. Dan and Nick, thank you very much for that presentation. I thought it was excellent, to be honest. I enjoyed the presentation and the way you made the case for AI friendships. Personally, I find some of my AI conversations I had with ChatGPT, Pi, and the other ones I mentioned in my presentation, more rewarding, to be honest, than some of the conversations I've had with friends, Facebook friends. The rewarding part of it was that as a philosopher, I enjoyed having these intricate philosophical discussions with these chatbots in a way that I couldn't have them on Facebook, because a lot of people, let's face it, don't know a lot about philosophy. And for example, talking to ChatGPT on the deceitful demon argument from Descartes, and having this sort of interesting conversation with it, was very rewarding. Similarly, with other philosophical aspects, when I was discussing it with Bart and about wisdom, of course. So I agree with you. I think this relationship of friendship of some sort with AI agents could be very rewarding. I found them personally rewarding from my own experience. Even some of these conversations I had in a pub when I was feeling a bit bored, and so I started chatting with ChatGPT, and the conversation was philosophical and very rewarding as a result. And it wasn't just a superficial conversation; it was a very, what I would call, discursive conversation, rational discursive conversation. So from a personal point of view, no, I agree with you that it's highly probable, if not possible, that we will develop these kind of friendships with AI, if not now, in the future. Thank you very much.
Yeah, one of the things to note there that I think is quite important is that we don't tend to have general purpose friends, right?
No.
That is, friends who are the person we would turn to in all situations. And so it might be that that for philosophers in particular, who are trapped in a pub with no other philosophers,
Yes.
and AI is going to be a fantastic friend to have
Yes.
on call, so that you can have these conversations when you really need them. But that same AI is going to be useless if what you want to do is shoot a basketball, right? Like right now, I want to shoot a basketball. The AI is not much help. But then I want to discuss Descartes, and Dan's not around. The AI is going to be fantastic. So there are kind of, just as for humans is the point, there are kind of cases when you want this friend. This is the friend for this moment. And I think there are, as you have pointed out, many examples where AI can be the friend for the moment, even now.
Yes.
Okay, everyone, really great discussion about friendship with AI, the pros and cons. I'm personally not convinced yet, but I thought this was a fantastic discussion.